4. Hello and welcome back to the International Trade Forum. We have the pleasure of having our County Council Vice Chair here with us, George Leventhal, I apologize, who will be sharing some remarks on international trade as it pertains to Montgomery County.
Thank you, Kelly. I want to congratulate Montgomery Community Media for putting this together, and I want to congratulate all of the distinguished participants. This is really the issue of our time, and the issue of the future is how do we position our dynamic community to be a participant in the global marketplace. On behalf of the Montgomery County Council, I just appreciate being invited to give brief greetings, because our goal in Montgomery County government is to communicate far and wide the extraordinary resources that our county offers. We are the international gateway to the nation's capital. Now, as a county, how would you think that we would participate in the global marketplace? First of all, we have 1 million people. We have a budget of $5 billion. So both in terms of population and in terms of the size of county government, we are larger than 5 or 6 states, depending on whether you measure by population or by budget. In addition, we have the highest per capita rate of graduate degrees of any community in the United States, and we have the largest percentage of foreign-born residents in Maryland, and among the highest of jurisdictions of our size in the United States. So some communities are wary of immigration, not so here in Montgomery County. We are proud to be a magnet for talented, capable, ambitious people from everywhere who choose this place to be their home. Every one of us here in this room had options. Most of us have been educated elsewhere. Many of us were born outside the United States. But no matter where we were born, no matter what language we speak at home, no matter where we worship, we have this in common. We chose this place to be our home because it offers such an extraordinarily high quality of life, such a sophisticated, cosmopolitan environment. And for global business, it is a tremendous place to find a workforce that speaks your language, a highly trained, highly educated workforce that understands your business, that has the contacts, has the connections to make your efforts to sell and to purchase from here and to here successful. So I'm very enthusiastic about this conversation. I'm proud of the resources that we have. And as we move into the future, how do we continue to position ourselves as this international gateway? First of all, we have to improve foreign language education in our public school system, and we have to start at the earliest ages. We have excellent immersion and magnet programs. We need to expand those. We need to make sure that we're especially strong in the business languages of the emerging economies. Chinese, most important, but also the language of other emerging nations. We need to be teaching Arabic. We need to be teaching Portuguese. We need to be teaching Hindi and Urdu. We have tremendous resources in our federal agencies. We're so proud to be the home of the National Institutes of Health, the Food and Drug Administration, NIST, the Department of Energy, Walter Reed Navy Hospital. But what we need to do a better job is making sure that we're taking advantage of the basic research that is either being conducted intramurally or supported extramurally, and work on commercializing it and making sure that we have the best access to information and that we're sharing that information with the entrepreneurial sector and identifying venture capital. That's what our biohealth innovation initiative, which we're doing in the county in collaboration with the state of Maryland, the University of Maryland, and Johns Hopkins University, is dedicated to. We are confident that in the decades to come, Montgomery County will be extraordinarily well positioned to be out in front of the growing global marketplace in knowledge-based industries, high technology. We want the high-wage, high-tech, science-based, knowledge-grounded jobs of the future. And I just thank you very much for conducting this extraordinary discussion today, and I thank you for letting me present.
So with that, we're going to kick off session number 3. Again, hello, my name is Kelly Leonard, and welcome to this panel on manufacturing for a global customer base. The companies seeking to sell their products overseas have to adapt their products to new markets. And so they may also have to go through product certifications and meet standards not commonly used here in the United States. So in this session, we're going to learn from companies as well as a state of Maryland representative on how exporting begins at home where your product is actually being manufactured. So to kick us off, I'd like to start with some introductions. First, we've got Carl Livesay. Carl recently joined the state of Maryland as the Manufacturing Program Manager for the Department of Business and Economic Development, or BDED, or DBED. He brings with him more than 30 years of manufacturing expertise domestically and internationally as a consultant and as a manufacturer. In addition to his role at DBED, Carl is an accomplished author and recognized expert for manufacturing articles published nationally. He's also the former chair for the Maryland, D.C. District Export Council, who is actually a large supporter for today's event. So thank you for joining us, Carl. Next to him is Paul Quinn. Paul is the Vice President of Sales for Ellicott Dredges, one of Maryland's most active export companies with equipment sales to over 100 countries. Paul is a member of the Maryland, D.C. District Export Council and has a vast amount of experience breaking into new markets and selling to government and private customers overseas. He also undertakes approximately 12 international trips a year covering Latin America, Asia, the Middle East, but although Africa remains his primary focus. And then lastly, we have Barbara Biller. Barbara started in Intellitec in 1995 with her husband as an engineering services firm. The company has grown to design and manufacture iFill, the iFill family of precision liquid dispensing pumps, closure systems, and conveying systems for the biotech, pharma, and specialty chemical industries. The company supports customers in 24 countries, or 24 states and 5 countries. Barbara currently serves as past chair of the Carroll County Department of Economic Development Commission and the chair for Workforce Development Subcommittee. She's also a governor-appointed member of the Board of Trustees for the Carroll Community College. So welcome. I'm going to kick off the panel discussion with a question that I will pose to both Paul and Barbara. And it is, tell us a little bit about your business specifically, and then how you got started in exporting.
Paul. Okay. Our business specifically is designing and manufacturing dredges. I always feel like the odd person in the room because not everyone knows what dredges are, but dredges are large floating vessels designed to excavate material underwater and pump it somewhere else for miles and miles. You might be more familiar with it by thinking of how they rebuild the beaches over at Ocean City or the Outer Banks or the Jersey Shore. Those are dredges, many of them ours, or dredges used in environmental cleanup, removing contaminated sediment, and harbor improvements, river maintenance. So what we do is we design these. They can take up to a year to design and build them at factories up in Baltimore, Wisconsin, sometimes overseas. Construction can take anywhere from 9 to 14 months. So it's a really pretty heavy manufacturing scenario. Some of these we build for stock. They're standard designs. Some of them are custom designs for foreign governments, foreign entities, and those are the ones that we have very long cycles and prolonged negotiations, quite a bit of an effort. So this is something that we've been doing for quite a while. We're really not sure when our first export was, because the company was founded in 1885, and we've actually been doing the same thing since then. Pretty unusual for American business to have the same focus for that long. And also to remain in manufacturing, because I know I've been in manufacturing for 35 years. In the 80s, 90s, so many companies just sourced out manufacturing overseas. But it's pretty unique. We've been doing it for so long. Probably our first export, we sort of collectively think, was for the Panama Canal construction about 100 years ago. We've been doing it ever since.
Awesome. How about you, Barbara? Well, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. Intellitec we design and manufacture liquid filling equipment for the biotech and pharmaceutical industries. And the cornerstone product of our family of products is our iFill dispensing pump. It has unmatched, repeatable dispense accuracy. Doesn't mean much maybe to this audience, but within the biotech and pharmaceutical industries, when you have spent months formulating a product, you are at the point in your product cycle where you've got all your money invested. So taking that product from the big batch to the smaller batches, the unit doses, or the container you're gonna sell that product in becomes very critical. We have not been in business for 100 years. I'd like to say we have, but we have not. My husband and I started the company in 1995 as an engineering services provider and have pooled our expertise and focused on a niche going down the liquid filling line. Our first, and it's interesting to hear Paul mention, because manufacturing truly is manufacturing. Some of our products, we make standard modules. Our pump is the cornerstone of our product line. And we make it baby bear, mama bear, papa bear, depending upon your fill volume and your rate of how many containers you need to fill. So those modules we make standard, but for every customer that comes in the door, they have a new adventure of filling. Small containers, large containers, small and large containers, round, square. So we put our standard modules together in a custom configuration to solve their filling issue. So everyone gets a unique filling line made up of our standard products. We built some custom equipment for a customer back in early 2005. What we found is our multinational customers here in the US pulled us abroad because we are a small company. They have somewhat like the Southwest airplane model. Once they settled on an airplane, that airplane flies for that airline. Some of our customers settled on our pump as a solution and wanted it in their factories around the world. So we were happy to accommodate. So then in that same sort of theme, Paul and Barbara again, so how have you had to change or adapt your product to meet that transition going overseas? Well, in the small device of a filling line or a pump, obviously there are power and utility issues in different countries. So we had to match up to different countries' power requirements on the technological end. Some of our devices also use compressed air. So there's challenges when you are shipping your equipment to foreign countries that maybe do not have stable power, do not have the same power phased as what we enjoy here in the United States. So there are some of the more obvious elements. Also, the languages. While we have found that predominantly the language of business is English, the users of the equipment may not always understand or be operating a piece of equipment in English. So not that we have changed everything from a language standpoint, but using more universal symbols for on, off, motion versus not motion, things like that. And then Paul, what about you?
Hey, I'm going to sort of break this up into two different categories. We have, I guess, some voluntary changes that we make to adapt our products and others that are more mandatory. One of which is the electrical. We have different electrical standards that we work with, and even going to Canada, which is currently a big market because of the oil sands now, the electrical standards in Canada that we have to conform to are quite different than the ones here, which is underwriter laboratories. How do we do that? That's really through engineering. And also in our case, a real big issue is, this is where the United States is sort of all by itself, is metric versus English dimensions. And everyone but us Americans thinks in metric. And that gets, I've gotten to the point where I think metric first, but our engineering department, which is in Baltimore, they're still designing things in English. Adapting that is critical. It's a choice we have to do if we want to participate. And then for the barge part of our vessel, there's what's called classing societies that determine the seaworthiness of your design, when it's ABS here in the United States or Bureau Veritas in Europe. Sometimes if we want to participate, we have to follow other standards. But we do that's voluntary, and this is actually what's made us really successful in a lot of markets. When it comes to the operating technology of our equipment, we have a free hand. There are no standards. It's what we think best. And what we actually do is try to match a technology to the skill level. It used to be the skill level of the buyer. Then we realized buyers don't operate these dredges. Operators do. That has been a very successful approach where we don't assume all the operators are going to be like college-trained Americans. And we work in a lot of developing countries, and in Nigerias and Iraqs, and some sophisticated countries, and we actually match the technology that the operator has to work with what we think will be the typical skill level. And that actually has helped us increase our market share quite a bit against the Europeans, who believe just latest technology is the best and you force it on everyone. So we try not to do that. We try to be really aware of what skill levels are like in each country.
Okay, awesome. And then along those lines, in your personal experience, and again, Barbara and Paul, what has been the recognition or the response to the notion of made in America or made in the USA when it comes to delivering your products overseas?
Well, it's very interesting. In the packaging machinery industry, there's very stiff international competition from both the Germans and the Italians, and the U.S. definitely holds their own. I think the difference being is the European countries will dig a deep niche in precision engineering and not a lot of change in their equipment. So our industry is highly characterized by technologies from the 70s and 80s because they're tried and true, they work. But the difference with the equipment in the U.S., and certainly the thing that divides my company apart from our competition, is the use of, and it's not even cutting edge technology, it's technology that has been available and is now becoming more industry reliable. Things like robotics. Well, we've heard about robotics for a long time, but in the packaging machinery industry, there's limited use of robotics. For moving large pallets, well, we actually use a robotic arm to tighten the cap on a bottle. And we are one of the few, have been one of the few for the last 3 years, that have integrated robotics into our filling equipment. And we've been able to do that largely through the benefit of the automotive industry, because their use of robotics in the factory floor has now increased their affordability and their use. So we're not using the big robots like you see in the automotive factories that you might see on TV, or if you have the opportunity to visit. We're using a very small, light load robotic arm that will pick up a cap, put it over on the bottle and actually get it started. So that made in the USA, I think we have the edge on innovation, ingenuity, good old Yankee ingenuity. So we are perceived as doing things very creatively.
Okay, in our case, it's a huge benefit to have the Made in America label, and so much so that for some countries we have to put that in bold letters on the proposal to make sure they see it, that this will be made entirely in the United States of America, because we've had customers who weren't sure if it would just be partially made there or fully, and they, in our case, and our equipment is sometimes associated with heavy machinery or like Caterpillar type products, even though it's floating. American equipment is usually thought of as being more robust, more sturdy, more reliable than even our competition in Western Europe. So there's actually, it's beneficial for us, but the Made in America, and it is true for equipment in our class. Usually American products generally have the longest life, the best reliability. But besides the manufacturing part, it's also, we found that it is a really big deal for the buyers to come to the factory in America and see it. That is really important to them. I think they'd rather come to Baltimore than to go to Hamburg or Amsterdam. It's not that bad up there, even though we're in Montgomery County. But no, it's really important that they come, and a lot of them won't finalize the sale because they, buying something from America means a lot for a lot of the parts of the world we work in. And then it's also with the American, and this applies to a lot of businesses, not just manufacturing, but in a lot of cultures they prefer doing business with Americans because we're more honest in our dealings. And they have a lot of respect for that, and a better feeling about dealing with an American company than some others.
Are there specific cultures that you found that are most responsive?
Yeah, actually in Latin America, we actually had a case very recently where we were asked by the Brazilian government to quote to submit some offers for equipment. One of the reasons was they specifically said this, and this is only about 10 days old, and it came through the Commerce Department down there. They prefer doing business with Americans because they know we're more honest in our dealings than some of our competitors.
Well, that's refreshing to hear that, so thank you for sharing that. So Carl, what about you? In terms of government and resources that are available to help companies export, please share with us your thoughts on that topic.
Great question, Kelly. There's actually several state and federal resources and some volunteer services. I'll talk first a little bit about DBED. We've got, of course, our international team. We, right in the Baltimore office, have a dedicated team of professionals, one of which was on an earlier panel, Jessica Reynolds, who are focused geographically on particular regions of the world, and they do an absolute fantastic job. Their job is to advocate for Maryland-based businesses in the exporting of goods and services. We also have a business development team that does a terrific job connecting with the companies here in Maryland regionally. So they have territories, they're territory-based. And then those folks work closely with groups like mine, which is a manufacturing focus. I focus exclusively on the manufacturing industry. But we also have a group of people that focus exclusively on the bio community, another group that focuses exclusively on energy and alternative energies, and also a group that focuses exclusively on cyber. So we have the geographic coverage and therefore the cultural coverage and the focus from a business development perspective, but we also have depth within the organization by individual industry. And I would encourage you to contact, I would encourage people to contact their local regional rep or call me, and I'll be glad to put them in touch with them. The USIAC, U.S. Export Assistance Center, one of our partners we work very closely with, has a lot of resources. They also have some industry-focused teams that are just superior. And they work closely with the DBED team, the international team, as well as the industry teams. We really, and this is, I don't think it's unique to Maryland, but it is certainly very pronounced in Maryland. We work very seamlessly between the state and federal government on programs like Intellitec, which just recently completed a class, and we can talk about that later if you have interest. The USIAC team offers business consulting and mentoring. They offer services like a Gold Key service, which is extremely valuable for vetting potential clients and helping to capture new business opportunities. And frankly, the international team for the state and the team at USIAC both have boots on the ground in those countries with organizations that are advocating for Maryland-based businesses. And then, of course, both DBED and the USIAC have trade missions and therefore trade wins, which are extremely effective. If you're ready, if your business is ready, trade wins and the trade missions are a tremendous way to get to a very targeted group of customers very, very quickly. And it's been extremely well received. And I got to give a shout out to our folks at USAC. That whole Trade Wins program nationally was founded here in Baltimore. Bill Burwell is actually the one that started that. So we take a more assertive approach to cultivating business. And then, of course, there's the District Export Council. And the District Export Council provides mentoring. We do some road shows that are seminar-based, much like this forum is. We provide consulting, and when I say consulting, it's professional-level consultants. Everything from IP protection to finance to manufacturing to whatever the need happens to be. The District Export Council also offers a readiness assessment, and that's a real important piece. It's one thing for you to do business well domestically. The game changes when you do business internationally, and you may or may not be ready for it. So the District Export Council puts together a team, and they'll go to a company and do a readiness assessment and then talk to you very directly and say, you're ready here, but you're not ready here. And it addresses things like the standards and quality requirements and testing, et cetera. And then, of course, we the DEC also participated with the Export Tech class, which is also a national program that was started here in Baltimore.
Awesome. And so since we're on the topic of the DEC, can you share with us some of the additional programs that are coming up?
Sure. Well, the District Export Council, you may or may not know, the people that are members are appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. So it's an all-volunteer army, so to speak, who are recognized for unique contributions. And our goal as the District Export Council is very similar to that of the Department of Commerce, which is to improve the balance of trade. So we're exclusively working on behalf of American businesses to help them export their goods and services. The District Export Council is focused on small and medium-sized companies interested in international trade or that are potentially new to exporting and just need some help. And then to your specific question, events that are coming up, we have a celebration of international trade coming up May 22nd, which will be at the Maritime Institute up here in Baltimore. I encourage you, if you're interested in exporting or if you're currently engaged in exporting, to participate in that. It's very reasonably priced. I think the attendance is $99 a person, and you'll be afforded an opportunity to rub elbows with between 350 and 450 other exporters and professionals in that community. We also are the ones that host, if you will, the Export Tech class, which has been extremely successful. And we just finished the most recent one. They'll be starting another round relatively soon. And then, of course, we do road shows. So if there was an event here in Montgomery County, we'd be glad to provide some experts to come down and talk to people about exporting and removing the barriers to international trade.
Awesome. Thank you. And so, Barbara and Paul, Carl just laid out a number of different resources, government resources and agencies that are available to help exporters to thrive. Can you describe for us, of those agencies that he listed or resources that he listed, how have your respective companies been able to tap into those resources to sort of take your organizations to a new level or the next level, or just to transform the work that you do?
I might segue off of Carl and I were in probably the very first Export Tech seminar that was run through the USIAC, Bill Burwell's group. And what a fantastic, it went for months, because we'd meet half a day over months. And I always kid Carl, he was top of the class, not that I'm competitive. But at the end of the class, you were to have done your homework and put together an international business plan. And it was specifically tailored toward executives who were looking to export their products, which obviously we were, and I think we passed. That class was instrumental for me in starting to build the network of people that I needed to do business internationally. It's one thing to do business within your county, within your state, within your country, but the level of the business transaction becomes so far more complex when you're dealing across the ocean or wherever your new customer is. So that Export Tech seminar put me in touch with freight forwarders, attorneys, intellectual property attorneys that we now have our trademarks protected in India, people that I met and took the benefit of meeting to reach out to them. As a small company, you're limited by resources. Well, I now had access to so many more resources that I could find my way through this international business transaction. I was using a small local bank, which was fine for doing business within the U.S., but I made the step to working with a bank who was international that could help me in getting a letter of credit, that could help that collaboration between my company and a foreign bank to make that happen. And there's a lot of I's that need to be dotted and T's that need to be crossed with a letter of credit that I was not familiar with. So met a bank that I could work with, an international bank. So I've been the benefit of Export Tech. Exim Bank was able to get receivables insurance. I think the biggest fear is, oh my goodness, what if my customer doesn't pay me? So finding a agent who could accommodate me and work with me so that I now had receivables insurance, and I could sleep at night knowing that no matter what, I was going to get paid, and it was not going to be the worst thing that would happen in the world. Working with one organization that has not been mentioned yet, the World Trade Center Institute, which I think in this area we have the benefit of having a port, rail, and airports. So we have all forms of transportation that kind of come together that gives us now a level of vendors and support and services for exporting that I think is a little bit unique. Only the major cities and that might have that benefit. So the World Trade Center Institute was probably one of my first forays into an organization that helped me determine what the risk was of even doing business internationally. And that's probably step number one. You need to determine from an organization, a company level, what is your appetite for risk in stepping into international trade and exporting. So they were step number one, and they not only then got me the contacts into Bill Burwell's organization, USIAC, the Department of Commerce, the state of Maryland. And one of the links I used also was the state of Maryland has Export MD, which is a grant program to support companies who are stepping into international trade. And I actually applied for Export MD grant funds to attend a trade mission. So that was just a unique combination. When Carl says that the state and the federal resources work together, they truly do, in a real sort of way where, I got grant money from the state of Maryland to attend a federal trade mission. So there's some of the things I will tell you from my experience. People do business with people. And so as a small company, I very quickly learned to reach out to my resources, make those connections, let them know what you do, have them come take a tour of your facility. It gives them a better idea of then what resources they can bring to bear to support you. So all of you being here today are probably doing the very best first step in terms of learning what resources are available to you, making those contacts, enlarging your network, and taking those first steps.
And you know, on that note, with people, the importance and the fact that people do business with people, we understand that relationships are really powerful. And so, Paul, I was wondering, can you touch on, has there ever been an instance where it became more palatable, or you would have greater success if you formed somewhat of a joint venture or a partnership with someone in order to compete overseas?
Yeah, that's common in our business because it's the nature of what we build is so big. You know, the shipping costs can run close to $1 million on some of these larger vessels. And it's really impractical to compete halfway around the world if they can build it. And sometimes there's also local content issues. When we're selling to governments, we're 10-20% of what we're offering, they prefer to have built locally. So in our case, a typical solution would be to have a joint venture with a shipyard where the higher tech equipment and the more all the equipment with our intellectual property and the equipment that isn't that big can still fit in containers. That's produced at the factory in Baltimore and sent over. We currently have one of these in Bangladesh. I'm going over there on Friday to look into it, where they're assembling 4 very large dredges that we just would not have been able to compete if we had to build them in the U.S. Mm-hmm. But probably 70% of the dollar content comes out of the U.S. Mm-hmm. So it works out very well. When you do this, you have to protect your intellectual property. You have to be careful of selecting your partner and also selecting countries that would be respectful of your intellectual properties. There's some countries we probably just would not do this out of fear for losing that. But it's actually a pretty good approach, and besides helping with local content, helping eliminate huge transportation costs, ideally your joint venture partner can also be your marketing partner. And in a way it kills 2 birds with 1 stone, in that not only do you have someone that's going to build your equipment, they'll help you go out and find business for you. And when it works very well, it's great. It doesn't always work well, but usually it does.
Awesome. We're going to open up the floor for questions. If you have a question, you can just come forth for the panel.
Hi, Paul. My name is Marta Chacon. I represent an International Credit Management Association, and we have a partnership with Commerce, and we've just recently entered into a partnership with Exim. And what I have found is that traditionally we represented large to multinational firms. Mm-hmm. And what I found was that even though they were well entrenched into the international market, that many of them come back to use the resources that you're speaking about. And what I would like to ask you is, do you still find that even though you have entrenched yourself internationally, that you do come back for the resources from the state of Maryland, from Exim, from the Commerce Department?
We do, because the largest obstacle for us to increasing our sales is the ability of our customers to obtain financing. And really, one of the keys to our success is just trying to be innovative on helping customers get financing. And we have one person just dedicated to that, who has relationship with banks. For the government, I'll give you some examples. About 10 years ago, we undertook some very large contracts with Iraq. and the payment terms were not very good. It required a huge amount of working capital to do this. At the time, we got loans from SBA. Without those loans from SBA, we would not have been able to undertake those contracts. That was really, at the time, the sole resource we had, and it worked out very well. And also, it branches a little bit from the credit, but for financial security, with those same projects in Iraq, because these were government sales, we had to issue some very large performance bonds. And for those of you, is everyone familiar with performance bonds? You're basically putting money, in bond at a bank that the client can take if they're unhappy with your performance. And very often, governments don't like to give it back. It's just they're losing control. There's a government agency that will insure those called OPIC. And we did have the problem with Iraq. They didn't want to give us our bonds back, and it was millions of dollars at stake. And OPIC worked very hard to get it resolved. It was resolved, but even if the Iraqi government failed to give the bonds back, we would have been reimbursed by OPIC, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's Overassessment Corporation. The real credit issues are really currently with our customers, because we sell to a lot of developing countries where the financial markets and the lending practices just aren't as developed. It's very hard for our clients to get loans, and they're very high interest. When they do get them, 25% interest isn't uncommon. One obvious, because our equipment has a long life, medium-term financing is something that'd be very desirable from XM. We haven't had that much luck in getting those deals through. But another area where we have from XM is credit risk insurance, where we have inventory of some of our dredges. We can sell them. We can sell them on open terms. Our biggest fear is, well, the customer won't pay us a year from now. And that's where XM comes along, and they guarantee payment of that, at least 90% of the payment. And we have two of these out there right now. We did once have a customer default. It didn't really cost us much at all. So it was a very good tool, the credit risk insurance, and it really allowed us to expand our sales. It's worked out really well.
Thank you.
Now, so Paul mentioned finance being a challenge. Carl, what other potentially large challenges might manufacturers have as they expand overseas?
There's one very large, that's a great question. There's one very large hurdle that is often overlooked, and it's called ITAR. It's the International Traffic and Arms Regulation, and in particular, it's the dual use component of that. There are significant restrictions on the use of, or the export of certain products or capabilities that can be used for defensive or offensive purposes against the United States. And so if you're going to export, you need to pay attention to whether or not you need an ITAR license, and most companies do. And all that says, frankly, is that your product may be used in that capacity, but you need to also get a State Department license if that's the case. You certainly want to apply for it, and a commercial license from the Department of Commerce. And both are relatively easy to obtain, but the penalties for non-compliance are pretty severe, and they're often overlooked. The other thing that certainly financing is a big issue, but there's also a few barriers. One is the cost. It's expensive to pursue international trade the first time, especially if you go it alone. Whereas if you engage the District Export Council, the USIAC, DBED, those folks, we can help mitigate a lot of those costs. And you have to look at, in my opinion, you have to look at your first venture with international trade as a marathon and not a sprint. Don't expect to sail in the first 3 months. It's not going to happen. You need to decide that you're in it for the long haul and take whatever steps are necessary. And I will say that although it sounds like there's a lot of negatives to do with global business, there's also a lot of positives. And I think it's important that we pay attention to that. Number one, the margins are typically substantially better than domestic sales. Customers are very loyal to American-made product, and they give preferential treatment. And the market is huge. So you expand your product and your footprint by engaging those who advocate for your product and services, by engaging the federal government, the USAC folks, and organizations like DBED. I've referred to them as a force multiplier for the manufacturer, and frankly, in a lot of cases, for the service company. The only other thing I would say is, to Barbara's point, you have to be aware of your tolerance for risk, because there is risk, but there's risk with any market. IP is an issue. Assume it's going to be taken. So be very careful. And then standards compliance. And then, I would engage companies like Washington Laboratories. They pay attention to those things. They sweat the details to make sure that you're compliant with the standards, and to do the conversions, and make sure that you don't get in trouble. You don't find out when your product is on the other side of the border that it's not compliant and can't be used in country.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This actually concludes this particular panel on manufacturing for global customer base. Carl, Paul, Barbara, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to welcome back to the International Trade Forum. We have the pleasure of having our County Council Vice Chair here with us,